What's going on, everyone? Hope you're doing well. We got a Tuesday, right? Start every lesson the same way. Hope you're doing well, and I say what day it is. So, today we are going to go deeper into the Rwandan genocide. I hope you like it. I find this stuff fascinating that people going to school every day, going to work every day, can turn into these people that want to kill their neighbors. And I think we've talked about this before, some of the things that need to be in place. I love what some in class have said that just this does not happen overnight. It's true, I think, for all genocides. This is slow in building, and people are desperate. We're going to get, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but there's a part in the article, if you remember from yesterday, the government was giving people food, water, and money to kill their neighbors. Things would have to go really badly here, I think, because most people every day get enough, they get enough food, they get enough water. So we don't have really desperate citizens in this country, thankfully, yet. Hopefully never, right? Hopefully never. So what I want to do is go over some of the more difficult things in this article, some of the things that you might not understand as you're reading this. And what I want to do is kind of go over what I think is important and then what I might skip as a reader. And this I think will really help you when you get to high school, because there might be a lot of material that you have to read, but not all of it is important. And there are actually some hacks where sometimes with middle school students, I see if they do try to take notes, they're like highlighting everything or underlining everything. So let's try to drill down a little bit today and figure out what's important, what's not. It just depends on what you're trying to get out of the material. Like for today, my hope is that we will try to understand how genocide happens, what has to happen to the people that make them want to commit these horrible crimes. So let's get into it. This was something we read yesterday. So hopefully it's not like completely brand new. We got the title again, History Lesson, the Rwandan Genocide. I think a lot of times when you're looking at pictures, it can be helpful. We looked at this one yesterday. I did want to say a little bit about it because when we read, we'll find out that within a short period of time, really short period of time, like 3 to 6 months, when the genocide started, the refugees were the Tutsis. They were the ones leaving because they were the ones being killed. And then just like 3 months later, you had the RPF, that army coming in, led mostly by Tutsis from like Uganda, from like outside of the country. And then now you have Hutus that are on the run because they're worried that they and their families are going to be prosecuted for war crimes. So with that said, I'm not exactly sure, these little kids, what their family might identify with, but it looks like a lot of people are on the run. And here comes the help. I don't know. And at any point, when you have something like, hey, chime in here, okay? Chime in. Let me know what you're thinking. All right, let's move down a little bit further here. These first paragraphs are usually really helpful because a lot of times they will summarize what you are about to read. And right now I'm taking like a college course. I think I'm taking like 3 more before the end of the year. It's quite a bit of work, lots and lots of reading. Like I think the assignment is to read 5 or 6 chapters. But each chapter in the textbook has this like half-page summary about what you're going to read. Those are incredibly helpful. So don't skip those first couple paragraphs because they might give you an idea of what the material is that you're going to be reading. And maybe you figure out, well, I don't have to read all of it. Okay. And yes, of course, there's a Google form here, but I think the most important thing, that's just kind of like to prove what you learn. But I think this discussing is even more important so that we can try to figure out how this stuff happens and maybe prevent it from happening in the future. All right, let's take a look at this right here. In 1994, the Rwandan genocide lasted for 100 days. During this period, members of Rwanda's Hutu ethnic majority murdered as many as 800,000 people, mostly of the Tutsi minority. Hopefully, that is all just like, yeah, I know that stuff. The genocide was started by Hutu nationalists. That is something I do want to talk about today, in the capital of Kigali. It then spread throughout the country with shocking speed and brutality, as local officials and the Hutu power government urged ordinary citizens to take up arms against their neighbors. By the time the Tutsi led Rwandese Patriotic Front, okay, so those are the good guys coming from, they were probably at one time living in Rwanda. We also learned that Burundi had a lot of Tutsis. So these were outside forces coming from other countries, or they were formerly living in Rwanda. Gained control of the country through a military offensive in early July. Hundreds of thousands of Rwandans were dead. Now, this is where the other refugees come in. 2 million refugees, mainly Hutus, fled Rwanda, worsening what was already a full-blown crisis. All right, so let's talk about that word nationalist. I think that's extremely important. A couple classes yesterday, we had a discussion, but I think if we could just pause right here and then talk about what a nationalist is, because it's a little dangerous. All right. So hopefully somebody said a nationalist is someone who loves their country so much that they want to take over other countries. So World War II, when you guys start studying that, I mean, certainly the Nazis, right, were nationalists. Right now, the Russians, and when I say the Russians, be careful. There are some people that don't want to spread the idea of Russianism or whatever. But there are some people, and definitely in the government, that do, that want to go back to that greater Soviet Union. So let's just take Russia for now. A nationalist would be somebody who is in favor of taking over Ukraine or parts of Ukraine or the Russian speaking parts of Ukraine. And that's what happened in Germany, is that this isn't about Germany. We will get to that when we get to the Holocaust, but Germany lost a lot of territory in World War I. So a lot of German nationalists were like, hey, we need to get that territory back. There are German speaking people living in France, and that's not right. Got to take that over, take it back. So that's a nationalist. And when we talk about connotation, always a bad connotation. Okay. You don't want to be a nationalist. I don't think we have a lot of Americans that are nationalists. We might have some with racism and something. I think some neo-Nazis, maybe white supremacists or whatever. They might be, you could call them a little bit if they want to have just a different type of a country nationalist. But I don't see a lot of Americans saying, hey, we need to take over Canada or Mexico or Cuba or something like that. So luckily, but maybe with the idea oh, we should bring, freedom to other parts of the country. And if it means that we have to invade them to show them what, is going on, maybe we need to do that. So be careful. Luckily, I don't think this is a time in our country where there's a lot of nationalism. Luckily, not by at least a lot of people. Yeah. I don't want to get political, but 2020 was interesting. I don't want to get political. Okay. Moving on. So hopefully that makes sense with nationalists. All right. By the early 1900s, Rwanda, a small country with an overwhelmingly agricultural economy. So can anybody figure out what does that mean? There's some really large words there, right? But it's not all that different from what we've talked about. Any ideas? Hopefully somebody said, using one of our words, overwhelming, way too much of something. Agricultural, that's farming. Economy has something to do with money. So a large majority of the people made their money through farming. All right. And then the next one right here, I do want to talk a little bit about this, had the highest, this might be new for some people. What does that mean? The highest population density in Africa. What does that mean? Population density. I'll pause here. Excuse me. So hopefully somebody, maybe many people, said it's when you have a lot of people living in a small area. Yeah, and if you look, the U.S., I don't know, New York City certainly has a large population density, but then something like Wyoming, or I think it's actually Alaska, that's the least densely populated. Alaska would be. Maine, probably on the low end too, especially up north, right? Does anybody even live in a rustic county? Maybe a couple people, but yeah, the population density is not that great. All right, so we didn't get too far. Let's just get to this part here. About 85% of its population was Hutu. The rest were Tutsi, along with a small number of Twa, a group indigenous to the Rwandan region. So let's end on that. What does that mean? Just as we've talked about indigenous Americans, what would indigenous Rwandans be? Hopefully someone said it's like the earliest people group living in that part of the world. All right. Enough for today. Pretty intense. Maybe a Google form for Rwanda, but we still have a few more days to talk about Rwanda and hopefully a couple videos that will be super interesting for you. All right. Probably more interesting than this one. This is a lot of work. All right. See ya. Adios, amigos.